What's it really like to travel through Europe by train? In this episode, Narelle shares how she travelled through Europe by train, what the experience was really like, and why she'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is founder of the Global Travel Planning website, Tracy Collins. Each week, Tracy is joined by expert guests as she takes you on a journey to destinations around the world, sharing travel inspiration, itinerary ideas, and practical tips to help you plan your next adventure. Join us as we explore everywhere from bustling cities to remote landscapes, uncover cultural treasures, and discover the best ways to make your travel dreams a reality.
Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the Global Travel Planner Podcast. So this week we have a trip report with a difference. I'm joined by Narelle, who travelled through Europe by train using a Europass, visiting 4 different countries over 3.5 weeks. She didn't do that alone. She travelled with her husband, her sister and a close friend after they'd already spent several weeks in the UK beforehand. Now I will be talking to Narelle about her UK trip for the UK Travel Planner Podcast. But this week, we are talking all about that trip around Europe. So we're going to talk about what it's really like to plan and take a multi-country trip by train through Europe, from choosing the routes and booking seat reservations to managing luggage, accommodation, food, and some long travel days. Narelle shares what worked, what surprised her, and why train travel ended up being such an enjoyable part of the journey, rather than just a way of getting from A to B. We also talk about some very meaningful stops along the way, including time in France, the Swiss Alps, Austria, and Poland, and how traveling by rail shaped the pace and feel of their entire trip. So I started by asking Narelle to introduce herself, who she travelled with, and where they went on this European adventure.
My name's Narelle. I went with my husband Wayne, my sister Dimity, and friend Zara, and we went for 3.5 weeks, the Europe part of the trip. And we went to France, Switzerland, Austria, and Poland.
Wow, so that's it. That's nice. And you started off, where did you start off that trip?
We started in London because we did 4 weeks in the UK beforehand. So we took the Eurostar over to Paris. Then we got a day trip down to Bayeux, which is a tour, like private driver picked us up from Paris. And then we stopped at Monet's Garden on the way down for an hour and a half. Yeah. And then got to our bed and breakfast in Bayeux.
Perfect. Now I know you started that trip in London because you had the previous month you'd spent in the UK and Ireland. So we'll talk about that for the UK trip. So if you listen to this podcast and want to know about what Narelle did before she went into Europe, that's the episode that you've got to listen to. So you started off basically in London. Where did you finish at the end of your 3 and a bit weeks?
We finished in Warsaw.
Okay. And then from there, did you fly back to Australia?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Stop over in Singapore on the way back, only for a couple of hours.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's difficult there's not that many flights we could do straight all the way back, is there, that you could just do in one go? So, okay. So was this the first time you decided to do like a train trip like this around Europe?
Yes. We always said we wanted to do trains everywhere. But so we decided and my husband wasn't going to drive through Europe, so we decided to do the train.
Well, I mean, you know that how much we love train travel, and we did one previous to that as well. We were traveling around. We went through Germany, and then we had to do some flights and ended in Poland, and we've done a lot of kind of train trips around Europe in the past, and it's just a fun, great way to get around Europe. It really is. So now, at what point did you decide that using a Eurail pass was going to be the best option?
It was about a year and a half before as I was planning it, because it started off only the 4 weeks in UK, and then we just kept adding on. And then I was just looking at Euro passes, and it just worked out the best. And I ended up getting a sale on the November sales they usually have somewhere around there. And I ended up getting first class passes for 10 days in 2 months for about 750 Australian dollars, first class. So, and you're allowed to get it 11 months before you got to have your first journey in 11 months. So I'd message them and made sure I could buy it then on sale and it would still be fine, and it was. So.
Oh, brilliant! And with that particular pass, did you have to say which countries you wanted to go to, or did that cover you for a larger number of countries?
That covered us for wherever, because I ended up using it for 2 trips in England and Ireland that we needed, so for a longer day. So
yeah. Oh, perfect. So did you find when you were looking at doing all your research, because I know you're a planner, we talk about planning trips, we both like planning our trips, don't we? So when you were planning with the Eurail, did you find it kind of, like you say, obviously you contact them and ask them about, getting the pass and using the pass. Was it fairly straightforward? Did you find the whole process straightforward?
Yes, getting it organised was, because it's only like ordering it. The only thing I was worried about was that first trip, how to create the code, but once I watched a few YouTube videos, I just copied them, and then it was actually quite easy. Once you've done your first trip and you know what to do, it was quite fine. Like, you just create your trip, and it was easy to cancel a trip if a train or you change trains, put it in, create the code. I usually took a screenshot of the code just in case of the internet, and I always had paper copies of our pass as in that anyway, so because I'm a paper person as well.
it's always a good idea, because you never know when technology is going to let you down. That's for sure. So how about designing? You obviously you're spending the time in the UK, and then as you say, your trip kind of expanded, kept going. So tell me about how you decided about where to go in Europe, because there's so many countries to choose from, and the actual route that you decided on.
Well, my husband, when we were so close to Paris, France, my husband wanted to definitely go because his great uncle has died in the war. So I'd messaged a private tour company, and he said, no, I'll find the grave. I'll take you to him. And so we knew we were doing that in France. And then we knew we wanted to do Auschwitz-Birkenau, because we like to see those sort of things, not like seeing those sort of things, and then so we just decided to go down through, and we thought, well, we want to see the Swiss Alps, and then he wanted to see Eagle's Nest from Salzburg, so I drew a line round, and that was it. So,
and how about researching which trains you were going to take? Did you find that straightforward?
Fairly, yes. Once I went on the Trainline app, I got a couple of the apps, and I just looked and which one was most popular. They usually just pop up which are the most popular, and I tried to get direct journeys, and it was quite easy. So.
And what about seat reservations? Did you have to pay extra for those, or were they kind of included?
Yes, I was more worried that we wouldn't get a seat, but looking back, you would get a seat. But I booked seat reservations, so the 4 of us were always sitting at a table.
Yeah. I think that's quite a good thing to do, though, because you just never know. And if you want to all sit together and have a table, at least if you've got a seat reservation, you're guaranteed that. And then you're not stressing, because you're not thinking, oh, are we all going to be together or not? You just have, if you get on a really busy train. Yeah. So tell me, how overall did you find the travelling? Because, I love travelling by train, so I know you say the same. But overall, how was your experience of using the trains?
Oh, it was really good. Really good. We had... not a problem. Every platform, I was worried about which train, which carriage to get on, how would we know? But every train in Europe, every platform in Europe has got a picture of the train, where you stand on the platform to get into whichever class you're in. And it was really simple, really. And you just ask. We found, the language. I was a bit worried about the language barrier, but we learned please and thank you and excuse me in every language we went to. And
but it's really useful. It's a really useful thing, isn't it, to do that?
And they all speak English, so
yeah, that's true. So tell me about your actual itinerary then. What were the highlights of? Because you went to 4 countries, so let's talk about each of the different countries and what you really enjoyed. So obviously in France you had a bit, obviously a family connection and going to the grave of a relative. So what else did you do in France that you enjoyed?
We were down in Bayeux for 2 days. One of the best days we had, we hired electric bikes and had 8 hours on electric, and we actually rode down to Normandy. They give you a little app, the map, and you go through little tiny villages, little lanes, all the way down to Normandy, Omaha Beach. So we had lunch down there, and it was just, that was the best day, just off the beaten tracks and that. So that was brilliant. And then seeing the Bayeux Tapestry, we went and seen that just before it was getting closed down. So we just got in for that. Then we went back to Paris. We had 4 days in Paris and just wandered around, really. We did the Louvre. My husband wanted to see a picture called the Raft of Medusa in the Louvre, and of course the Mona Lisa. You go and see that. And then we took a lift in the Eiffel Tower. I didn't climb it.
Yeah, no. You can. I think you can. I think you can go up to, I don't know which level, but I'm like, no thanks. I'll take the lift.
Yeah, we took the lift. And other than that, we just wandered around Paris and just looked around and just had a nice time. You know, it was nice to be there. I didn't find it, I love the architecture and that sort of thing, but I probably wouldn't go back to the city part of it. I'd go to other parts of France now. So,
yeah.
And then we trained to Zurich. We had an apartment in Zurich, and we went to Rhine Falls one morning, which we went before the crowds. As we left, it was getting super busy, but it was just, there was about 5 of us on the little boat that we took out to the falls. Yeah, and then the next day we did Interlaken and Lauterbrunnen, I think it's called, just the Instagram sort of areas. Yeah. And that was a really good day, beautiful weather. We had beautiful weather the whole 8 weeks, just fabulous. And then the next day we just wandered the old town, wandered through Zurich. Then we went on to Salzburg for 3 days, wandered around, did the palace there. My husband and I did a half-day tour trip up to the Swiss Alps to the Eagle's Nest, which was wonderful. That was a brilliant trip. So, and in France we did the day tour to all the Australian war memorials and all the cemeteries over there, and he was brilliant. The man that we had through him, it was just us and him, and he just took us through everywhere, knew everything about everything. He'd worked out where Wayne's uncle had died. He worked out what he had done the week before he ended up in hospital and that sort of thing. So, and that was a brilliant tour. So.
Oh, you have to share. You have to share some information about the tours that you book, because that would be interesting. Yeah. It's always good to hear, a recommendation if somebody's had a particularly good experience with a guide. We went to. I have to ask you, because we went to the Eagle's Nest, or I don't know, probably maybe 10 or so years ago now, probably more than that. How did you find them? I just remember getting up there in the coach because it's a little bit. Don't look over the edge, isn't it?
Yeah. I made the mistake of sitting on the window, so I was looking straight down the mountain. I was like, no. I said to my husband, I'm not doing that again. You can sit on that side.
Yeah, I have to say, I think I'm with you on that, because I can still remember that trip up and thinking, I don't want to look over, because it was very scary.
Very hard.
And then it was. And then from Salzburg, did you stay in Vienna, or did you head to Poland at that point?
We went to Vienna for 2 nights. Did the Schauenberg Castle, or Palace, I think it's called, and we did the Mirabelle Gardens, had a photo on the fountain from The Sound of Music, and just wandered around. My husband went to one of the war museums in Vienna, and then on to Krakow. In Krakow, we did the Old Town, we did Schindler's List Museum. We did the tour out to Auschwitz and Birkenau. So, yes, we had a brilliant 4 days there. You can't explain that sort of feeling to anyone going to those places. It's just
it definitely stays with you. We went about 15 months ago. And it was, I think the week after I didn't sleep very well because, it is very emotionally impactful for sure, going there. And then was that the last place that you stayed before you flew back?
No, then we trained to Warsaw, and we just had 2 days in Warsaw and wandered around, did the Jewish quarter, just all the old town, just had a little bit of a rest, really. We didn't do any tours out of Warsaw.
So what about, because obviously you're taking the trains, so there's some logistical things I want to ask, because there's always logistical things when you take the trains that you have to take into consideration. And one is where you stay. So did you decide to stay beside the train stations, or did you go a little bit further afield? Because some of the cities in Europe around the train stations can be a bit dodgy. I'm thinking about Rome here. So how did you find your accommodation, and what sort of places did you stay at?
I usually booked on booking.com, free cancellation, and what I'd do is I'd put in the train station and then look round that. But I think the longest away was about a 15-minute walk that I'd booked, and that we had apartments most of the way. The last 3, Krakow and Warsaw and Vienna, we stayed in hotels. Mm-hmm. But we wanted laundry facilities being away for so long. And my sister is celiac, so it was better for her if we cooked food ourselves. She knew what pans were being used and things like that. So
yeah. Well, those are two kind of things that I guess, when you travel, and we get asked all the time, is that how do you manage doing your laundry? And, it is interspersing. If you want to stay in some hotels, is interspersing it with somewhere where that you can do your laundry, or find somewhere that you can close by that you can do it. The other thing I think that kind of goes with that as well is like, how did you pack? Because you were away a long time, and I get stressed when I've got too much luggage, and because it's getting on and off trains, thinking of where you're going to put it, keeping your eyes on it all the time. So how did you manage that with the packing?
I packed 3 pair of trousers, like a jeans and a couple of leggings, and I think I had about 4 undershirts, 2 wind cheaters, and then our puffer jackets. And I took rain jackets, but we used them for 5 minutes in Scotland, and that was it.
Wow. But you were very lucky with the weather.
Yeah, amazing. And then just 2 pair of shoes. So, just rotated them. So.
And what about when you were travelling, were you tempted to buy anything, or you're pretty good at not over-purchasing when you travel?
I did buy a new pair of trousers and a T-shirt in Warsaw as we were coming home, and I just brought magnets from the main areas. And I brought some things for my granddaughters, but I sent them home via post. Other than that, didn't buy anything, no.
Oh, that's good. Well, it's always something to think about, especially when you've got a longer trip.
Yes.
Not to if you are a purchaser, not to overdo the baggage. What about food? Because obviously I know you were saying that you cooked quite a lot in the different apartments that you stayed at because your sister-in-law's having celiac. But how did generally, because obviously you're going through different countries in Europe with different languages, different kind of foods available, different kind of traditional foods and stuff. So how did you find that?
Quite easy, because I'd booked the restaurants. I'd looked up reviews for restaurants, and like if they had mostly good reviews, I'd book a few nights when we were staying in the hotels. I'd book a few nights at those restaurants, and they were usually steak and vegetables and that sort of thing. Like we had the schnitzel in Austria and that sort of thing. But other than that, no, I had baguettes in Paris, and so we found it quite easy to eat, So
yeah, there are some nice foods, I have to say. When I'm in France, you can't beat a French croissant. They really do croissants better than anybody else. They should do, but they are really good. What about so going back to the train journeys themselves, because you did quite a few. Were there any of them that you kind of go, oh, they were just fantastic, you really, really enjoyed? Was any of them particularly more scenic than others, or just any of them just you found it just a really nice experience?
The one from Paris to Zurich was beautiful. And then we had the scenic one from Zurich down to Interlaken, and it's like all windows. That was just amazing. Just the clear water in Switzerland is just unbelievable coming off the mountains. And the one from over to Salzburg was just as nice, just going from through the Swiss Alps and down. Then you get to the paddocks and things like that. So, but they were all amazing in their own way. So they were brilliant.
And then, so obviously you had your Eurail pass. So how did it go with obviously getting on and off the trains or getting the passes checked? Because I know sometimes when you're on the train, the guards come around and they want to check. So did they have to see your passport as well as have a look at the pass? How did it work?
We had the QR codes, and I had our piece of paper for our seat reservation, so they knew that we'd paid for that. I didn't have to see our passports once. They just checked the QR codes. They come around as we sat down. And I think one place, I think it could have been Paris, they had a guard at a gate that you go into. They checked there. But other than that, it was on the train. He'd just come around, check everyone's, and that was it.
Oh, that's good. So they didn't even check your names or anything. They're just happy to see that's really good. That makes it, really easy.
Yeah. And just before you get on the train, you click on that trip and goggle your little thing to, yes, this is the train you're on, and you're good to go. So, yeah.
And away you go. So that's good. So did you, obviously some of the train journeys you're on were quite long journeys. I've done that one from Paris to Zurich, actually. Yeah. So did you take anything on the train with you, or did you just kind of go and try the buffet car on the trains? Or did you make sure you took everything with you before you went?
We took a few things. Most of them, a couple in Poland, they weren't doing food service. Whether they didn't have the staff or I don't know. But a few the food came through. You had to pay a little bit for it, but it wasn't that much for a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. But we just took our cards and some Lola snacks and that sort of things, and our water ourselves. So,
yeah. It sounds amazing. So if anybody's considering, and I have to say, Doug and I, we did, when our daughter was younger, we did two summers on the bounce. We did train trips around Europe. And this is a long time ago because she's nearly 30 now. And this is when she was about 10, 11. And we did that, and we would fly to a destination and then kind of go around Europe and then fly back from a different destination. We did that. This is the third year she said, I'm not doing that again. I think she's had enough of it. but we found it feels so much fun. And another advantage I think you've got over that, because when you go on an aeroplane, you don't see anything. No. You're just in you can't really get up and wander around, which you can do on a train if you want to go and have a bit of a wander. You can a plane, you can't get up and down, but it's not the same. No. And you're always the risk of, on a plane and you've got a bit of turbulence and you're all over the place, whereas on a train, you should be fine just walking up and down. So you've got that kind of advantage. And you can look out the window and see the scenery as you go. And then you also often get to meet local people, because a lot of local people will be on the trains as well and strike up a bit of a conversation. And I don't know about you, but whenever anybody hears an Australian accent, I know when I'm back here hear an Australian accent, usually people are like, there's usually another Australian somewhere in the vicinity.
There usually is. There was on a couple. So.
Yeah, and it's lovely, isn't it? It's like you get the chance to chat and meet. And I remember travelling with Dominique when she was younger and sitting on a train in Italy, I think, and having a family join us. And we was in kind of the carriage system, and they came in and they were sharing sandwiches with Dominique. And it was just a really social event as well. So the whole, it's like Doug sometimes says to me, he'll say, sometimes the trip it's not so much the destination when you're on train travel, but it's the getting there as well. The journey is also
that was the fun part, everything. And the people we met, like the bed and breakfast we stayed at in Bayo, a lady called Diane ran it, and there was an American older couple with their son and daughter and their partners staying there as well, and they were all doctors. And, we had breakfast together and chat what we'd done that day and things like that. So it was just brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. So you meet other people and you find out where they've been and what they've done and what they'd recommend. So that's already good. What about if you were, I'm thinking about anybody listening who's thinking, oh, I quite fancy doing something like this. That sounds like a really cool idea or something I want to experience. Is there anything, tip that you would share with anybody who's planning to do kind of like a multi-country train trip around Europe?
Don't be nervous, as I was. It was just, once you did it the first time, it's fine. Once you knew what to do the first time, it was great. And don't take big suitcases. We took medium size and it was just perfect. You can lift them on. We didn't have a time when we had to leave them at our seats. They all fitted in everywhere, and it was just, just don't be nervous.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah, it's just, honestly, Europe is made for train travel. Totally.
Yes. Oh, we couldn't believe it, especially here in Australia. It's not we're not trained people over here, so we just couldn't believe it. So.
And tell me about it. Doug moans about that all the time. That it's he really does. He really does. Oh, thanks so much, Narelle, for coming on and sharing the European train part of your trip. We'll be having a chat soon to get the UK bit of your trip included as well, so we can piece it together. But we're both off to the Philippines, not together, but we're both off to the Philippines soon, aren't we? Which is really cool. So looking forward to that. So have a fantastic trip. Enjoy that, and I'll speak to you soon all about the UK side of it. But I will ask that if we can get some photos that we can share. So if you want to check the show notes and have a look at some of the photos that Narelle took on her trip, and I'll also get some of the names of the tour guides and maybe some of the places you stayed as well that you really enjoyed. And we can share that with our listeners as well, because I think that's always useful. But thanks so much, Narelle.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. For more details and links to everything we discussed today, check out the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favourite podcast app, because your feedback helps us reach more travel enthusiasts just like you. Anyway, that leaves me to say, as always, happy global travel planning.